It may seem like an eternity away, but it's almost 180 days until the 2024 presidential election. Former President Trump, who is still facing 3 indictments and currently sitting on trial in New York for hush money payments, is using the courthouse as his own podium, launching attacks on judges, district attorneys, and President Biden.
It's a disgrace to New York. And just like Engoron is a disgrace to New York, we won that case because we won it on statute of limitations. And he turned down the appellate division. He's a corrupt judge. And this judge is terrible. And Kaplan is terrible. They have me sitting here for a Biden trial. It's a Biden trial.
And Biden is facing his own battle, not in a courtroom, but in the polls. The president seems to be struggling to connect with voters as a multitude of nationwide issues erupt over the administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas war, border security, and continued funding for Ukraine. How will both candidates tackle these hot-button issues and convince voters they deserve another run in the Oval Office? It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, President Biden took a rare shot at former President Trump over his legal issues at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Are we seeing a shift in Biden's strategy, and does this mean he will make more attacks on Trump's legal woes?
I certainly think we're going to see that. I mean, we saw this shift kind of begin, 8 weeks ago at the State of the Union, where he used that speech to really kind of rile up his side and kick off his campaign. We'll see how it kind of plays out. You know, the polls were looking good for Biden the last couple of weeks, and now Trump's made a comeback in some of these swing states. So I think, you know, we're seeing a kickoff of these 2 candidates starting to go directly at each other.
You know, moving to Capitol Hill, the House is back this week, which really means all eyes are on Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who posted on social media that Speaker Mike Johnson's days as Speaker are numbered. You know, Scott, is she going to follow through on her threat to oust Johnson, or is this eventually going to die down?
You know, that's the big question. She's filed it, so theoretically she can call it. Since she's filed it, she's gotten some public support with statements from representatives like Thomas Massie. If they hold their support, she's got enough to force the motion to vacate. We'll see. I think it's very hard to predict what Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to do. It's clearly, you know, the way she did it the first time, it was to gain leverage. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this play out a little longer. And I wouldn't be surprised that a few hours from now she files it and we're watching a big marathon vote on the House floor. I could see it go either way.
Yeah, she's received support from Thomas Massie and Paul Gosar. And, you know, staying with the House Republican Conference, Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida, is facing a last-minute primary challenger, former naval aviator Aaron Dimmock, who filed to run as a Republican in Gaetz' district. What do we know about Dimmock so far?
Not a lot, only what the Oppo research has already dropped, right? Like these campaigns, they started early. There was an article in the Daily Caller that came out just yesterday talking about how he's had social media posts supporting DEI and some things around immigration and that may not play well in a Republican primary. You know, certainly Matt Gaetz is worried about it, but, you know, the Panhandle is a very Republican area. They like Matt Gaetz. We'll see how it pans out.
Absolutely. And moving to the situation continuing in New York City, protesters took over a building on Columbia University's campus this week after being issued an ultimatum: disperse or face suspension. And a group of 21 House Democrats called on Columbia University's board to end the encampment on campus or resign. Scott, how are these student protests across the country over the Israel-Gaza war further dividing the Democratic Party?
Well, it gives them something to respond to. It's interesting. When you look at the polling, the average voter, even the ones who have children in college, like, they kind of think this is stupid. You know, they have some opinions about it, but this is largely doesn't even come near as important as the economy or immigration or anything like that. But what does force, you know, Democrat elected members of Congress and the Senate do is to comment on it and take a position, and they're clearly divided on it, and it's eating up the news cycle. So it's not a good thing for them to be talking about because it's a no-win situation, and all the news reports just look like it's chaos, and people are wondering what's going on.
Moving to Texas, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton just filed a lawsuit over the Biden administration's Title IX rule that expands transgender student protections. Recently, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis slammed the announcement, vowing to fight. Scott, will this boil over into the national spotlight and become a major campaign issue? It seems like this issue, along with the student protests over the Israel-Gaza war, are the two key cultural issues at this time.
They certainly are. It's interesting. You mentioned Florida and Texas. It's an issue in the West Virginia governor primary race, probably a race not a lot of people are paying attention to. It's an issue in local school districts around the country, especially up in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where we recently saw some local elections around this. I certainly see it playing a role either in ballot initiatives, local school board, local mayor, local governor elections, and I don't see a way where it isn't brought up nationally, and you can see Donald Trump or Joe Biden taking opposing positions on this and really making it an issue, even though it's primarily it's a gubernatorial, it's a local school board issue, it's a local issue at that. But it is salient. This goes back to Governor Youngkin's win in Virginia, where he made that an issue in Northern Virginia, and it really propelled him forward. So I don't see it going away anytime soon, and I could see it becoming a bigger, at least, talking point on the trail.
Moving to the campaign trail, recent polling out of Minnesota, which holds the longest blue streak, shows President Biden's lead is actually decreasing. What's behind the latest numbers, and could Trump make some headway in the state?
Well, it's interesting. I was actually born in Minnesota, and it's one of those states that no one thinks about. It is the Pino Multe flyover state. And to your point, it's always voted Democratic. What I think the numbers are moving, and at least what some of the polling shows, is Donald Trump has started to appeal to more of the blue collar workers, more of the non-frequent voters, things like that. Minnesota has a lot of those. Historically, those have been Democratic votes, but those are a segment of voters that are moving more and more towards Donald Trump. And the Trump campaign has said that they are spending money and they're going to spend some time there. So we'll see what happens as that goes forward. I still tend to think Minnesota will be a Joe Biden state at the end of the day, but Donald Trump has managed to put Michigan in play too. So we'll see where it all ends up.
Yeah, Minnesota also home to one of those uncommitted votes over the Israel-Gaza war. Moving on to North Carolina, Biden is digging into Trump's lead in the state and is making a stop in Wilmington, where his campaign rival was forced to cancel an event in the city just over a week ago. Trump only won by 1.3% in 2020, but could this push turn North Carolina blue in November?
That's another state. We were just talking about Minnesota. That's where Donald Trump's going to try to make a move. This is where, the Biden campaign has said they're going to spend money with people on the ground and visits and things like that. Again, I tend to think North Carolina is, very likely to go Republican. But Joe Biden's got a lot of money, and he's going to try and make a push there to kind of open the map up. I could see it being a huge battleground state this fall. That's for sure.
So Decision Desk recently analyzed new polling data from the 2024 U.S. Senate elections. Democrats currently hold the majority. But do you think they're sitting safe this election? Scott, the conventional wisdom I've heard is Democrats have maybe a leg up in the battle for the House, but Republicans feel pretty good about the Senate.
Yeah, that conventional wisdom holds. And if we were to just dive into it, 3 states I'd highlight for you: Ohio, Montana, and Nevada. If the Republicans win keep the seats that they currently have, and then they win seats in Ohio, Montana, they win the Senate. And the Democrats have very good candidates in both Ohio and Montana. So let's say they manage to keep one of those two. Some people might say that, okay, they're sitting pretty at that point, but Nevada is becoming a battleground state as well. We see the polling there with incumbent Senator Jackie Rosen looking neck and neck. The Republicans just have too many paths to retake the Senate for them to not at least be the prohibitive favorites.
Sticking with polling, a new Emerson College national poll shows Trump leading Biden in key swing states, including Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, that's within the margin of error. But what's behind Trump's very narrow lead? This has got to be making the Biden campaign nervous.
It is. We see a string of, these Emerson polls, YouGov, CBS battleground polls. The polling averages for Donald Trump in the battleground states have held pretty steady. Now, to your point, within the margin of error, but he's on the right side of margin of error, at least from his point of view. So yes, those are very nervous. And it's interesting. It's in contrast to the fact that over the last 4 to 5 weeks nationally, Joe Biden has closed the gap on Donald Trump. Now, we don't elect our president via the national popular vote. So it is a little bit of two contradicting data points. But if you're Donald Trump, you don't mind, Donald Trump always wants to be ahead. He always wants to win. But if you had to choose which ones you wanted to be ahead in, it's these battleground polls, and it has been trending his way.
So the same Emerson College national poll also showed Arizona Senate candidate Ruben Gallego leading his Republican rival Carrie Lake. They were neck and neck in Arizona. Do you think abortion and immigration could ultimately tip the scales in that race?
Yes. Short answer is certainly the abortion issue. You can see this play out in the state legislature. I believe last week in the state Arizona State House. They voted a ban in. It's got to go to the Senate, and then the governor's got to sign it. You can see Republicans, switching sides on that vote, things like that. Obviously, it's one of those issues that no one had thought it was going to be a big state issue a few months ago, but that Arizona State Supreme Court did. And it is dominating the headlines not only in Arizona, but nationally. And both candidates are going after. And then Arizona is also an immigration state, and we know nationally immigration is a top 2 issue, and it certainly has been in Arizona. So yes, this race is going to be decided on those 2 issues, and you can also see it in how these candidates are talking on the trail. Both of them, that's pretty much all they're talking about.
Lots of new polling out today. Scott Trancher, thanks as always for helping us break it down.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for What's America Thinking. Come back next week. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. Leave your comments and let us know what's on your mind.